Do you remember Occupy Wall Street? Whether or not you agreed with them, I think most people would admit that, by and large, Occupy Wall Street brought attention to some issues here and there, but didn't have much of a significant impact on the financial system as a whole. The financial machine continued chugging along more or less as usual. In some ways, this shouldn't be a surprise. What ostensibly started as a reaction to rampant corporate greed and widespread income inequality, particularly in the shadow of the 2008 financial crisis, quickly fizzled out about a year or two after it began. But why did Occupy Wall Street fail? It's hard to say. On one hand, long-term protests of any kind are hard to maintain. But it was also clear that there wasn't a single consistent problem that Occupy Wall Street wanted fixed. Occupy Wall Street wanted some sort of nebulous fix to the problem of income disparity and corporate greed. And even the world's best economists would probably struggle to identify a fix for those problems. Moreover, the Occupy Wall Street message quickly became diluted. What started as a protest about corporate greed quickly became one about racial and gender rights, freeing Palestine, opening borders, modifying the American electoral system, ending fossil fuel consumption, and more. What really arguably killed Occupy Wall Street was PR. In Occupy Wall Street, it was not hard to find examples of, for lack of a better term, people to make fun of. Take, for example, the so-called Joe the Puppeteer, an overeducated and yet underemployed puppeteer that joined Occupy Wall Street to, it seemed, bemoan the difficulty in finding a job using his MFA in puppetry. As another example, it wasn't hard to find examples of so-called Occupy Wall Street dance parties, featuring bongo drums, hippies, and dudes trying to get laid. In other words, a good idea became laughable, all because its loudest and most noticeable adherents were laughable themselves. In my mind, we're seeing this exact trend again, albeit with the subreddit r/antiwork on Reddit. By way of a quick background, the subreddit r/antiwork is one of the variety of different online locations where individuals discuss the anti-work movement, which fights against modern forms of work. This manifests itself in arguments for fewer work hours, more pay, and things like that. As of January 26, the movement appears to be imploding on itself. The reason this time appears to do with a recent Fox News interview with Doreen Ford, one of the moderators of the famous r/antiwork subreddit. The reason, in short, is that Ford did terribly during the interview. Ford, an underemployed pet sitter for the pet care app Rover, did pretty much everything you possibly could do to look like a lazy bum, rather than someone with a genuine concern about how workers are treated in modern society.
But you're not being forced to work. This isn't slave labor. You've applied for a job. You've agreed to the terms and conditions of the employment. And, you know, you can walk away from that job at any time and quit. So I don't understand really what this is about, except it sounds like maybe people are just being lazy. Are you encouraging people to be lazy?
So I think laziness is a virtue in a society where people constantly want you to be productive 24/7, and it's good to have rest. That doesn't mean you should be resting all the time or not putting effort into things that you care about. But I think one of the
What do you think is like a good work day? How many hours is you know, a solid work day in your ideal society?
Sure. I mean, I think as much as people want.
Ford didn't bother cleaning up what appeared to be an incredibly messy home, possibly in a basement, didn't appear to bother showering, nervously moved their gamer chair back and forth during the interview, and generally came off as an underprepared and somewhat selfish loser. Worst yet, Ford fell right into the trap laid by Jesse Waters, letting the discussion become personal.
And what do you do, Doreen?
I'm a dog walker.
A dog walker. Okay.
Yes.
And how?
So
how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure, I'm 30.
You're 30. Okay. And is there something you want to do besides being a dog walker? Do you aspire to do anything more than dog walking, or is that kind of your pinnacle?
I love working with dogs. If I had to do this for the rest of my life, you know, I wouldn't be super complaining. You know, dogs are wonderful animals. But I would love to teach. I would love to, work with people and stuff like that.
What would you teach, Doreen?
Philosophy mostly. Just introduction to philosophy, critical thinking, reason, stuff like that.
Okay. Well, I would love to take your class, Doreen.
The sad thing is, Waters was right to hone in on Ford's personal failings. The majority of Ford's adult life has been spent taking care of dogs, and Ford's burned through nearly 12 years apparently ineffectively attempting to get a college degree, though Ford does claim to have had, quote, near perfect attendance, seemingly treating college like middle school. The more information that comes out about Ford, the less Ford seems even remotely empathetic. Pictured is a Facebook comment that was allegedly posted to Ford's own Facebook account. Needless to say, if you're assuming this comment to be real, if you're allegedly posting Facebook comments like this, having to proactively defend yourself against a horrible crime, and one of your primary defenses appears to have been that it, quote, wasn't a big deal, you might not be the poster child for a growing social movement. Things quickly went off the rails after this interview. Redditors complained about the interview for a variety of reasons, and Ford moved quickly to ban essentially any dissent regarding the interview. Some users quickly left r/antiwork for a replacement subreddit. As of the writing of the script for this video, r/antiwork remains completely locked down to any users, all because of the Ford interview and the backlash. This Ford interview is a good reminder about the power of optics. Whether or not you agree with the anti-work movement in its entirety, whatever that means, most folks would probably agree that there are some issues in the work world that need resolving. In other words, anti-work might not be 100% right, but most of us could probably find 1% of their message that we might agree with, if only partially. The problem is you have to pick your messages, your goals, and your representatives. Movements cannot afford the luxury of having inconsistent messaging, wanting the world, and then being represented by horrible people that are rife for parody. These sort of problems are what kill many social movements. In my view, many political movements, Occupy Wall Street, the Tea Party, the anti-work movement, Black Lives Matter, they've had this problem and they've suffered for it. At the same time, it's important to remember that many organizations suffer for these issues, and to not penalize the message because of the messenger. Many political movements attract weirdos, and those weirdos often like to leap into the limelight for attention. News organizations love to highlight weirdos, and they especially love it when they can do so in a way that denigrates political causes. That doesn't mean that the underlying cause is correct or incorrect. It just means that the weirdos like attention, and biased organizations will take the shots that they can take. As always, I would like to thank you immensely for watching this video. I'd always appreciate your thoughts in the comments, what your thoughts are on the Doreen Ford interview, anti-work, or anything in between. And as always, thank you very much for your time.